Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Timur Guel from the International Energy Agency in Paris. It is a great privilege to address this distinguished audience today at the IGCC's Climate Change Summit. I regret very much I cannot be with you today, but would like to provide you with some background on the IEA's analysis with regards to stranded assets in the energy sector. The energy sector has always devoted considerable resources to finding and then proving up fossil fuel reserves in the expectation that they will one day be commercialized. The extent to which these reserves are consumed and the CO2 emissions released differs by fuel and the policy environment according to the nature and intensity of the climate policies adopted. We have looked at the amount of fossil fuel reserves that remain underground in more detail. Under current trends, we use half of our proven fossil fuel reserves until 2050, as you see here. This is of course different by fuel. While we develop 3/4 of proven oil and 80% of proven gas reserves, 2/3 of coal reserves, which are obviously much larger, stay underground. Pursuing climate action, much more stringent climate action in the attempt to meet the 2 degrees target means that more than 2/3 of current proven fossil fuel reserves are not commercialized before 2050, unless of course CCS gets much more widely deployed. This means that more than 50% of the oil and gas reserves get developed and consumed, but only 20% of today's coal reserves. Looking a little more closely at proven oil and gas reserves, we have to say that already today, 30% are already producing. In a 2 degrees world, we are roughly looking at developing another 20% of these reserves over the next 20 years, which is a little lower than we would otherwise do under current trends. In our projections, no oil or gas field currently in production would need to shut down prematurely. Some fields yet to start production are not developed before 2035, meaning that these proven oil and gas reserves do not start to recover their exploration costs in this time frame. But of course, most of them are also not developed under current trends. This does not mean that we can sit back and relax, of course, but it means that we need to carefully anticipate climate policy in order to limit the amount of assets stranded to the extent possible and minimize the economic damage. Because all of this obviously can come at a cost. One can, of course, always discuss about the definitions of stranded assets in this kind of context. But in our analysis, the amount of fossil fuels stranded under a 2 degrees trajectory amounts to around $180 billion until 2035, with an additional $120 billion in the power sector and others occurring elsewhere, probably in LNG infrastructure, for example. Now, talking about climate policy and stranded assets, I think begs the question, how serious do we need to take climate policy at all? As you know, countries are currently making their pledges towards COP21, which will take place in Paris in just a few weeks of time. We at the International Energy Agency have analyzed these pledges, and at other institutions as well, we found that they alone will not be sufficient yet to meet the 2 degrees target. But the political will that is expressed through these climate pledges is very considerable. As you can see here, by the 2nd of October, almost 150 countries around the world have expressed their plans to address climate change to the UNFCCC. We are currently working to update our analysis of these pledges and what they mean for the energy sector, and will release these updates in about 2 weeks from now. But it is clear that the energy sector transformation is already on its way in many parts of the world. And I would like to give you a couple of indicators for that, just looking back at the year 2015, where renewable additions in the power sector were at a record high, where energy intensity declined at twice the rate of that of the last decade, and already around 11% of energy-related emissions are covered by carbon markets. Now, let me conclude my brief intervention here with a couple of final thoughts. First of all, these pledges, as I just said, towards COP21 are not yet enough to achieve our climate goal, but they are and they will be a basis from which to build increasing ambition over time. When we talk about stranded assets, not all proven reserves can be used under a 2 degrees trajectory when it comes to fossil fuels, of course. But we should also keep in mind that even under current trends, some may stay underground for a long time to come. I would also like to bring to the attention of the panel and the audience in general to other thoughts. First of all, it is not the 2 degrees target alone that may or may not change energy markets. For example, Australia is a big coal exporter, and many of Australia's key export markets are increasingly grappling with air pollution, limiting potentially in the future the use of coal. We should also always keep in mind that changes in technology and changes in the policy landscape are part of the energy business. And it would be very interesting from my point of view to discuss what makes climate policy different from normal market risks. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a fruitful discussion on these kind of points.